He gave his life as a ransom sacrifice for all of mankind.
In almost any discussion or argument about Jesus, at some point someone will say, "That's just what I believe." What are such beliefs based upon?
I think you can approach Jesus by studying the historical Jesus, but I think in the last analysis, or in the final analysis, everyone has to take that leap of faith, what the philosopher Lessing called that ditch that we all have to jump across.
Faith has to be available to each generation. I think that's true in Rabbinic Judaism as well. There is this ongoing notion of revelation. If Jesus is to be available to Christians, you need a late 20th century Jesus for late 20th century Christians. There's no way someone living, say, in New York City in 1993 can have any real relationship to a Christ who lived in the year 30 of the first century in Palestine. They have to find some way of bridging the gap between their own perception and historical Jesus. That's what faith does.
In the same way that you would bring a chemist and a physicist and a biologist and give them one piece of physical evidence, and they would approach it and explain it in terms of their own discipline, so you can bring the record of Jesus to a historian and he will tell you he was a great teacher. You could bring him to a philosopher and they will say that he had a divine theory. You can bring him to a revolutionary or politician and say he was a liberator because he challenged the mores of the time. And all those are true, but they are not the entirety of the truth. To get to the entirety of the truth, I think you have to deal ultimately with what Jesus said about himself. If what he said as the central core of his claim was wrong, deliberately distorting what he was, claiming for himself what was not true, then there is no validity to his teaching.
An honest confrontation with the Gospels really does require you to make up your mind about this astonishing claim. And the astonishing claim is that the Son of God entered human history, walked among us, taught us the will of his Father, died, was raised from the dead, and now sits at the right hand of his Father in glory. Now, that is a rather bold claim. To try to reduce that claim to, well, he was sort of like Buddha or Gandhi 2,000 years before, or whatnot, is to miss the radical nature of the claim. And I think to miss the radical nature of the claim is to miss the heart of the claim.
People from all walks of life have been obliged to read particularly the four Gospels, our chief sources about Jesus, and that reading has a peculiar force. It really does force you to encounter him, that is, to choose one way or the other about his claims. The reading of those books has quite often an unsettling effect, sometimes a peace-giving effect, but also an unsettling effect.
He claimed for himself both manhood and deity, and he did that very specifically. He turned round and made a simple statement: I and the Father are one. He is in me, I am in him. There is no mistake the reality of the claim that he made for himself.
The believing Jew awaits the Messiah as the believing Christian awaits the return of the Messiah. And there was once a story that if the Messiah were to come, the essence of the descent between, or the relationship between Judaism and Christianity could be reduced to the answer to one question: have you been here before?
Because Christianity has been the dominant religion in our culture, the figure of Christ then becomes the legitimating symbol for all sorts of religious, political, philosophical ideologies.
While faith in Jesus is best understood through the beliefs of his followers, it is manifested in religion. Jesus is the vehicle by which many seek answers to the question of whether we are creations of the more loving God described in the New Testament, the more stern God of the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible, a more impersonal or faceless life force, or no God, but only a process of evolution. Here in the U.S., 84